The crystal champagne flute slipped from Victoria Harrington's manicured fingers, shattering against the marble floor of Lucille, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. There, at the corner table beneath the chandelier, sat her father, Charles Harrington, billionaire CEO of Harrington Industries, laughing and sharing a meal with the very man she'd fired just 3 days ago. Robert Chen, the quiet accountant who had never missed a day of work in 9 years until his daughter's hospitalization, was now dressed in an impeccable suit, looking nothing like the desperate single father who had begged to keep his job. If you've ever wondered about the true cost of compassion in the corporate world, or felt that karma has a way of revealing our deepest mistakes, this story will take you on an emotional journey you won't forget. Like, subscribe, and join me as we explore how one woman's coldest decision became the catalyst for her greatest transformation. Victoria had always lived in the shadow of expectations. As the heir to the Harrington fortune, perfection wasn't just expected, it was demanded. At 32, she had climbed to the position of COO at Harrington Industries' New York division, not through nepotism as many whispered, but through ruthless efficiency and unwavering dedication to the bottom line. Her corner office on the 47th floor offered a panoramic view of the city she'd conquered, but on this particular Monday morning, Victoria's attention was fixed on the email from HR confirming Robert Chen's termination. She closed her laptop with a satisfied click. The company policy was clear: unexcused absences were grounds for immediate dismissal, regardless of circumstances. The fact that Chen had worked weekends, holidays, and late nights for nearly a decade without complaint was irrelevant. Rules were rules. "Ms. Harrington, your 10 o'clock is waiting," her assistant announced through the intercom. Victoria straightened her Armani blazer and pushed thoughts of Robert Chen from her mind. The decision was made. Business moved forward. That was the Harrington way. Across town, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, Robert Chen sat at his kitchen table, staring at his termination notice. The 43-year-old widower had spent 9 years at Harrington Industries, climbing from junior accountant to department head through dedication and exceptional work. 9 years without a single sick day or vacation. 9 years of being the first to arrive and the last to leave. Until last Friday, when his 14-year-old daughter Lily collapsed during school. "Dad, stop looking at that," Lily said, entering the kitchen with careful steps. The doctors had diagnosed her with severe anemia requiring immediate treatment, but she was already showing improvement. "It wasn't your fault." Robert forced a smile. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Better than you, apparently." Lily placed her hand on her father's shoulder. "You'll find another job." "Of course I will," Robert assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at him. At his age, in this economy, with a daughter to support and medical bills mounting, the prospects were daunting. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Chen, this is Charles Harrington. I'd like to discuss a matter of mutual interest. Dinner tonight at Lucille, 8 p.m. Car will pick you up at 7:30. Robert stared at his phone in disbelief. Charles Harrington, the founder and CEO of Harrington Industries, one of the wealthiest men in America, wanted to meet with him? It had to be a mistake. Or worse, some cruel joke from former colleagues. But at precisely 7:30, a black Lincoln Continental pulled up outside his apartment building. Victoria's week proceeded as normal: meetings, conference calls, strategic planning sessions, until Thursday evening, when her father called. "Victoria, join me for dinner at Lucille tonight. 8 o'clock. There's someone I'd like you to meet." She arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, as was her habit. The maitre d' escorted her to her father's regular table, but Charles hadn't arrived yet. Victoria ordered a glass of champagne and checked her emails while waiting. The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of New York's elite. Victoria recognized several faces: a tech billionaire, 2 state senators, a famous Broadway producer. This was her world, one of privilege and power, where connections and appearances mattered above all else. When she glanced up from her phone, she saw her father entering the restaurant. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, engaged in what appeared to be an animated conversation, was Robert Chen. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers. "Victoria," Charles called, approaching the table with Robert at his side. "I'd like you to meet Robert Chen, though I believe you two are already acquainted." Robert's expression remained neutral, professional, betraying nothing of the humiliation he'd suffered at her hands just days earlier. "Mr. Chen," Victoria managed, her voice tight. "What a surprise." "Please, sit down," Charles instructed, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "Robert has agreed to head our new charitable foundation. The Harrington Family Foundation will focus on supporting single parents in crisis, providing emergency funds, childcare assistance, and job security during family medical emergencies." Victoria's face burned. "I wasn't aware we were launching a foundation." "It was a recent decision," Charles replied, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Robert's situation brought to my attention a significant gap in our corporate policies. Did you know he lost his wife to cancer 6 years ago? Has been raising his daughter alone while working tirelessly for our company?" Victoria began, but her father continued. 9 years without a single absence. 9 years of exemplary service. Until his daughter was hospitalized, and he was fired without so much as a conversation." Charles's voice remained even, but disappointment radiated from every word. "That's not how I built this company, Victoria. That's not the Harrington legacy I intended to leave." Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Harrington, perhaps we should discuss the foundation another time." "Nonsense," Charles waved dismissively. "Victoria should hear this. The foundation was your idea, after all." Victoria's eyes snapped to Robert. "Your idea?" Robert nodded. "When your father contacted me about returning to the company, I suggested that rather than simply rehiring me, Harrington Industries could implement systemic changes to help others in similar situations." "And it's brilliant," Charles added. Instead of focusing on his own misfortune, Robert proposed creating something that would help thousands of families. "That's the kind of thinking we need, compassionate innovation." Victoria sat in stunned silence as the waiter arrived with menus. Her father and Robert continued discussing the foundation, its structure, funding mechanisms, and implementation timeline. It was clear they had already spent considerable time developing the concept. "Of course," Charles said, turning to Victoria, "as COO, you'll work closely with Robert on integrating the foundation's principles into our corporate policies. I expect a complete overhaul of our leave policies, particularly for employees facing family emergencies." Victoria nodded mechanically, her mind racing. This wasn't just about Robert Chen anymore. Her father was using this situation to test her, to see if she understood what truly mattered in building a legacy. As dinner progressed, Victoria observed Robert more carefully. He spoke with intelligence and passion about creating safety nets for vulnerable employees. There was no bitterness in his manner, no hint of satisfaction at her discomfort. Instead, he repeatedly tried to include her in the conversation, asking for her input and acknowledging her expertise in operational matters. "Ms. Harrington would be instrumental in developing the implementation strategy," Robert said at one point. "Her understanding of the company structure is unparalleled." By the time dessert arrived, Victoria's initial shock had transformed into something more complex, a mixture of shame, respect, and determination. When her father excused himself to greet an old friend at another table, she found herself alone with Robert. "You could have sought revenge," she said quietly. "You could have sued the company, gone to the press. Instead, you're trying to create something positive." Robert considered her words. "When my wife died, I learned that anger only compounds loss. I needed this job to support my daughter, yes. But more importantly, I needed to show her how to face adversity with dignity." "Your daughter," Victoria said, remembering the reason for his absence. "How is she?" "Improving," Robert replied, a genuine smile warming his features. The treatment is working. She's already asking when she can return to school. She sounds remarkable. She is. Robert paused. She asked me not to be angry with you, you know. She said you were just doing your job. Victoria felt something crack inside her, a hairline fracture in the armor she'd spent years constructing. She was wrong. I wasn't doing my job, I was hiding behind rules to avoid making a human decision. When Charles returned to the table, he found his daughter and Robert engaged in a detailed discussion about flexible work arrangements and emergency support systems. Victoria was taking notes, her earlier discomfort replaced by focused engagement. It seems you two are getting along, Charles observed, pleased. We're finding common ground, Victoria replied, meeting her father's gaze directly. I believe the foundation has merit, and I'd like to propose expanding its scope to include educational support for employees' children. Charles raised an eyebrow, surprised by his daughter's enthusiasm. That sounds promising. What did you have in mind? As Victoria outlined her ideas, Robert nodded appreciatively. That would have made a tremendous difference for Lily and me, he acknowledged. The evening ended with tentative plans for a follow-up meeting the next day. As they left the restaurant, Charles pulled his daughter aside. You understand why I did this? He asked quietly. Victoria nodded. To teach me that our company is more than balance sheets and policies. It's people. Not just that, Charles corrected. To show you that leadership isn't about enforcing rules, it's about knowing when to break them for the right reasons. He squeezed her shoulder. Robert didn't come to me, Victoria. I heard about his termination from his department colleagues, who were planning to resign in protest. That's the kind of loyalty he inspired. The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had been so focused on appearing strong that she'd failed to recognize true strength in others. The following weeks transformed Harrington Industries. The announcement of the new foundation generated positive press and employee goodwill. Victoria worked closely with Robert, learning from his insights and incorporating his suggestions into company policy. The rigid attendance requirements were replaced with flexible arrangements that emphasized results rather than hours logged. 1 month after that fateful dinner, Victoria found herself in Queens, standing outside Robert's apartment building. She had come to deliver news in person. The board had unanimously approved the expanded foundation program, including full scholarships for children of long-term employees. Lily answered the door, her color much improved from her hospital stay. Ms. Harrington, she said, recognizing Victoria from company photos. Dad's just finishing a call. Would you like to come in? Victoria hesitated, suddenly aware of the vast difference between this modest home and her luxury penthouse. But the apartment, though small, radiated warmth. Family photos lined the walls. Schoolbooks and art supplies covered the dining table. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a home. I'd like that, Victoria replied, stepping inside. Robert emerged from the kitchen, surprised to see his former boss in his living room. Victoria? Is everything all right? Everything's fine, she assured him. Better than fine, actually. The board approved everything. The foundation launches next month. Robert's face lit up. That's wonderful news. There's more, Victoria continued. We're naming it the Lily Chen Foundation. Lily gasped. What? Why me? Because, Victoria explained, without you getting sick, none of this would have happened. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what truly matters. Robert's eyes glistened with unshed tears. That's... I don't know what to say. Say you'll both come to the launch gala, Victoria suggested. As my guests. As they discussed the details, Victoria noticed a drawing on the refrigerator, a colorful rendering of a girl standing between two adults, a man and a woman, all holding hands beneath a rainbow. The woman didn't resemble Lily's deceased mother from the photos Victoria had seen. Lily followed her gaze. That's my art therapy project. It's called My Future Family. It's beautiful, Victoria said. Who's the woman? Lily exchanged a glance with her father, who suddenly looked uncomfortable. Just someone I hope Dad meets someday. Someone who understands that sometimes life gets messy, but that doesn't make it any less valuable. Victoria felt something shift inside her, a recognition that the walls she'd built around herself hadn't just kept others out, they'd kept her imprisoned as well. 6 months later, the Lily Chen Foundation had already assisted over 200 families facing medical crises. Harrington Industries' employee satisfaction scores reached an all-time high. And Victoria found herself spending more and more time with Robert and Lily, helping with homework, sharing meals, discovering the simple joy of belonging. On the 1-year anniversary of Robert's termination, Charles Harrington hosted a private dinner at Lucille, at the same table where everything had changed. This time, Victoria arrived with Robert and Lily, the three of them laughing about Lily's science project disaster that had left their kitchen ceiling stained blue. You know, Charles said as they settled at the table, when I arranged that dinner a year ago, I had 2 goals, to right a wrong and to teach my daughter an important lesson about leadership. And did I pass the test? Victoria asked, reaching for Robert's hand beneath the table. Charles smiled, noting the gesture. You exceeded my expectations. You didn't just acknowledge your mistake, you transformed it into an opportunity to become better. I had help, Victoria admitted, glancing at Robert and Lily. They taught me that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who helps you become the person you're meant to be. As they raised their glasses in a toast, Victoria reflected on how a single day, one absence in 9 years, had altered the course of so many lives. She had fired a dedicated employee and gained a family. She had lost her rigid certainty and found something far more valuable, the courage to lead with compassion. Sometimes, she realized, our greatest failures open the door to our most meaningful successes. And sometimes, the people we hurt most become the ones who help us heal our deepest wounds. The crystal chandelier above them caught the light, scattering rainbows across the table, not unlike the one in Lily's drawing, now framed and hanging in Victoria's office as a daily reminder that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. And in helping others rise alongside us.